Hello, everyone, and here we go. We're just kicking off the pre-show chat. For those of you who have already joined me, thank you for checking in on this wonderful Saturday morning. It's looking pretty nice out there today. I hope you've got some great plans to get the most out of the weekend. This is the part of the show where I just make sure everything's working and potentially have chats with you about whatever pops into your heads, whether it's real estate or not. Let's see here. Just going to do a quick check and make sure that we're up and running on all the various places. Looks like we're up on YouTube.
And potentially have...
There we go. That's working. YouTube's up. Let me check on LinkedIn. It looks like we are up on LinkedIn.
On all the various places.
Yeah, we are. And let's take a look and see if we're on X. Chat is up. So feel free to use chat if you've got it. I know there's some platforms where you can't chat back to me. X/Twitter is one of those, for instance. There we go. So it looks like we're up.
Back to me.
Yeah, it looks like we're up on X as well. Wow, okay. Everything is working. How fantastic. And Facebook is showing me good numbers. Let's see here. Yeah, everything looks good. All right. As I said, I hope everyone's got great plans for the weekend or has already started their great plans. Maybe you've got time with the family put aside. In terms of just stuff going on with me at this point, since the last time we talked, or had I done one the last time we talked, I've done a road trip up to Nevada and scouted out some areas there. And the next on my list is Idaho. So we're going to do a little bit there. The reason for this is partially personal interest, but also just I've talked to clients who've decided that that's where they're going to go. These are places that folks have decided to go to. If I was going to relocate, I think I would probably do Nevada, just because I could just go right to the other side of the border there and still be close enough to come see family. It's only about 4.5 hours from the places I'm looking to return and visit with my parents or my sister. I hope you've all brought your coffee. I have mine. I have a very disappointing coffee this morning. I'm not really, it's just so very bland. I'm still doing the keto thing, so no sugar. I've got like fake sugar, and I'm trying a new fake sugar called allulose. And I just don't get this. It looks like sugar. It's granular like sugar. Did a little tongue touch of it, and I don't know how to describe it. It doesn't feel sweet. The monk fruit stuff was awesome. The monk fruit has probably been the best. So once I've used up, supposedly though the allulose stuff has some other benefits that I'm not tuned into, but I'm told that that's a thing. There's all kinds of stuff going on. August is going to be the month when the National Association of Realtors lawsuit and the change in the way buyers will be represented is going down. I do have a podcast in the queue for that. I realize for some of you who are followers of my podcast, it has been a while since I have done a podcast. It has been kind of a whirlwind of combinations of things that have prevented me from doing podcasts. It's really been part business, part personal, dealing with my kiddos. All of my kids are now officially adults, but one is full on into career mode, doing his career, working. The other one graduated with his degree in computer science, but has had a heck of a time finding a job in the computer science industry. So I think he has just now found one. So yay for him. He's going to start doing that. The third one, and my oldest, is going to be heading off to Texas to go to law school. And so there's been a lot of sort of prep for that. And I feel like I need to just cut that one loose. I need to stop, and this sounds like a bad thing to say too, I need to stop helping. He's a grown man I need to stop. I need to just let him do it and just let him ask me if he needs help, right? Because he's the kind of guy who will just go off and do it anyway. He's not going to take advantage of the situation. But I feel like I'm not doing him a good service as a parent by, I don't know how I think we're all there as parents, there as safety nets, but letting them go off and just do their own thing, right? Without us chiming in, I think is a thing. And particularly when I think about when I was a kid. I mean, I realize housing is different today, but I moved out right after high school. And that was it. And I aside from a 2-month period of time when I was in transition between two things, where I stayed in a room at my parents' house for a couple of months, that was it. Right? So, yeah. There's a lot of conversations we could have about that. And a lot of them would be self-critical. I really feel like I've dropped the ball in terms of how much I've kind of stepped in for my sons. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe when we're together in person, we can have that chat over an adult beverage. But as this show is titled, it is Coffee and Real Estate today. I think I mentioned I've got a disappointing. Yeah, I did mention it. Primarily because it just doesn't have the sweetness. Because for some of you who've listened for a while, I'm not a big coffee guy per se. I consider it a caffeine delivery system. So I'm not a connoisseur of the coffee. I do like it when it has like little hints of other stuff and that kind of thing. So I try to get different coffees. I'll get the beans and I'll grind them and all that stuff. But I try to get different ones every time to see if I can taste a difference. But then I make a mocha out of it, right? So I'm throwing in chocolate, I'm throwing in milk. So it's not like I'm a purist in any sense of the word when it comes to coffee. If you've got recommendations for great coffee beans, I'd love to hear it. I heard Kona coffee came off from a client once who said I really need to dip into that. And I think I did a while back, and I just didn't sense a huge difference there, but it was ridiculously more expensive than all other coffees, so it fell off the list. Maybe I need to give it another try. In addition to today's numbers, and remember June, we're going to cover June's numbers today. And June is typically considered the peak of the month. If you've ever had to sit through a real estate person's market analysis or their pitch to list your house with them, it's usually been a conversation that also talks about when the peak time is. And of course, for most real estate people, the right time to sell your house is whatever time it is, right? Well, if you look at the numbers, sellers tend to get the most money in June, that type of thing. But it's also important to keep in mind that that's based on closed escrows in June, which means you didn't put your home on the market in June. It means that you accepted a contract for your house in May, right? Because it takes 30 days for an escrow to close. So again, while June might be the peak month, that peak is created not by you selling your house in June, but by actually selling it in May and then having the escrow close in June, right? Just one of those little subtle things that often gets glazed over by an awful lot of folks. We're about 5 minutes away from officially starting the show. If you've got anything you'd like to chat about, maybe it's something I've mentioned before or glossed over, or you've just got a question, feel free to ask. Happy to address anything here during the pre-show. I've gone through the articles here, and we've got a few interesting things to talk about. I'm trying. Did I go ahead and include that one article? There was one subject I thought, I need to include that one just to remind me to comment on it because it wasn't so much. Oh yeah. We've got the Biden, the federal government interfering in rents, and I think if you are someone who believes that having government involvement in rental properties and those kinds of things is a good thing, I think we can at least agree that the federal level makes no sense, right? A standard like that needs to be imposed at the local level, if it needs to be imposed at all. I lean into I don't understand why the government believes they have the authority to dictate any of those things to what folks do with their private property. And none of these things end well, right? Whenever we start to see the government dictating whether or not rents can be increased or what the rents are. I mean, the bottom line is the market will define those things and do it pretty well. And even our more recent numbers nationally, right, show that the folks who say, oh, well, it's just the evil corporations gouging people. Well, evil corporations don't own all of them. And now we're seeing drops in rents across the country. So what was that, right? That's the market talking. The market would talk more loudly and more frequently if sort of government got out of the way. But we can talk about that if anyone's interested in having that conversation. And I'm interested in hearing your point of view on it as well. What else? Is there anything? The aquatic center here in Morgan Hill is going full bore, and I think I saw an article. What was weird was it says it was going to stay open till the end of August, and I'm like, well, why would it close in August? I thought the aquatic center was open almost all year round. I know I used to go and swim every morning, and I think I remember doing that year round. So I didn't read the article. I probably should have, but it just seemed odd to me. For those of you who would like to sort of get my more regular ramblings, I am on X/Twitter pretty much daily. The vast majority of what I post is real estate related. Every once in a while I'll slip in something not real estate related, but not to the point where I think it annoys anybody. So you can feel free to join me there. If you want to find me, you can go to my website, soldbyrobert.com, and all my socials are there. The places where I'm the most active really right now are X and Twitter, just because it's an easy thing to contribute to. It doesn't require me to put aside huge chunks of time to get involved. As I mentioned, we're about 2.5 minutes away now from the show officially starting. We're going to get into this month's numbers or the numbers for June. We are going to be having a new podcast for those of you who haven't been consumers of the podcast. My historical take on the podcast was it's a weekly. It has been several months since there's been a podcast, and I apologize for that. But the next one is going to be a buyer's how-to in order to really help people get the information they need to manage finding a real estate agent or making their way through the new reality where the way that buyer's agents are going to be compensated is being completely derailed. The old way of doing things is going away. I think August 18th or August 17th is the day. And this is all part of the lawsuit that's been going on for a long time. There's a whole lot of conversations we could have that would have absolutely no effect on this, talking about how odd that this is happening now. Lawsuits like this have come up dozens of times just in the time I've been a real estate agent, which is since 1988. And frankly, I am A-okay with pushing over the apple cart in terms of what the status quo is on what constitutes creating the right kind of compensation. But I prefer an additive approach, meaning you add options. You don't eliminate the option that's been available forever and substitute basically nothing and sort of force this other thing. And we can talk more about that. Again, I'm going to do a deep dive on it on the next podcast. And my goal is to record that either this weekend or Monday when I can carve out some time and then publish it sometime next week, sometime between Tuesday and Friday of next week. So you can check that out too. And again, you can find the podcast at soldbyrobert.com. It's also at therebelbroker.com if you'd like to find it there. So feel free. I can see I've got a couple of folks poking around on a couple of the different outlets out there. The show's about to start in 30 seconds, so thank you for joining me. I hope you've got your cup of coffee with you. Feel free to use the chat feature to reach out if you've got any questions. I will answer them right here during the show, so that should make it easy. But we're about 10 seconds away, so let's get ready to jump in. And just if it takes me a little longer than expected for me to see your comment, don't panic. It's all on two screens, so I can't look at everything all the time. All right, folks, it has turned over. We are at 10 a.m. on the third Saturday of the month. That means it's time for Coffee and Real Estate with me, Robert Whitelaw. I am a licensed real estate broker right here in Santa Clara County, serving the communities pretty much all over the county, focused mostly on San Jose, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy. That's really my home territory. I've been doing this since 1988. So I do have some mileage, and I've served everybody from all the way up in Palo Alto down to Santa Cruz and over to Gilroy and Morgan Hill. And I did one in Fremont a really long time ago, but it's a thing where I like to focus a little bit more. So if you've got any real estate goals you'd like to achieve and you would like me to help you achieve them, please feel free to reach out. You can find me at soldbyrobert.com. You'll find everything there. I've got a podcast that you can check out. I have a YouTube channel. I've got all kinds of stuff. So I've got articles that I put out monthly. I share those via newsletter, so feel free to check that out as well. And of course, I do the monthly coffee and real estate live chat. I don't even know how long I've been doing it. The podcast I've been doing since 2007. These I've been doing, I want to say 3 years, maybe even longer. Could be more. Could be 4 or 5 years. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump in. We're going to talk about, as we always do at the beginning of Coffee and Real Estate, we're going to go ahead and hit on the latest stats, and that's going to cover June. But we're going to look at some interesting numbers that a lot of folks don't. Let me go ahead and bring it up here. Okay, so first, let's go ahead and take a look at the total number of homes on the market. Now, this is the inventory number, right? So this reflects, for buyers, this is the number of homes you had to choose from. How many homes were out there for you to look at in the month of June compared to the same time last year? For you sellers, think of this as the competition number. How many homes did you have to compete with in June to try to get yourself sold? Now, we can see that in the county overall, we had a pretty big jump, a 54% increase in the total number of homes on the market to 1,714 homes from 1,112 last year. In San Jose, we had a 62% increase. We had 509 homes last year, with 827 homes being on the market in June of 2024. In Morgan Hill, a 61% increase, 54 homes last year, 87 homes this year. In Gilroy, we saw a 19% increase, 74 homes last year, 88 homes this year. So very big increases in inventory in June. This is not horribly unusual to have an increase, but an increase like this is phenomenal, and particularly when you compare it to the same time last year. I mean, that's a dramatic increase in the total number of homes that are out there. And in fact, it's to the point where you have to start wondering, has the supply now gotten to the point where we're bumping up against demand? And we'll take a look at some numbers here in a second to see if we can't figure that out. But that's really the key to the market right now. The market right now, as it has been for a very long time, is all about supply and demand. And we're also seeing interest rates coming down to regularly below 7%, which is also going to help fuel buyers stepping up. So we'll see how that goes. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at the total number of new listings. Now, these are homes that the owner decided to go ahead and put their home on the market in the month of June. It was up 37% from the same time last year in Santa Clara County overall, with 1,169 homes last year in June, with 1,598 this year in June. In San Jose, California, the number of new listings increased by 37%. It was 586 homes last year, 804 homes this year. Morgan Hill, dramatic increase in the total number of homes listed, which is interesting for Morgan Hill. This tends to be one of those outlier communities where one of the big challenges is there's always super low inventory. We saw an 81% increase, 43 homes listed last year in June in 2023. In 2024, we saw 78 homes listed in June. What's also interesting is while that works, I mean, you'll see homes selling in July, just like in a lot of it. It's a little late in the season to see that big of a jump. Just got a post from someone. Who do you know that would consider selling their multifamily rental property? Yeah, from Sean. I don't know anyone who wants to sell their rental property right now. And particularly in my community of Morgan Hill, I do know some folks who own duplexes, and those things come up so rarely that they tend to sell almost immediately. All right, so in terms of new listings, and in Gilroy, we saw a 23% increase, 62 homes last year, 76 homes this year in June of 2024. So that dramatic increase in Morgan Hill is very interesting. And I know folks I've talked to in Morgan Hill who are looking at listing their home. A lot of it is simply, I want to profit take now and take advantage of that in a market outside of California. About 80% of the people I talk to right now are looking to move out of the state. And that's completely the opposite of the way it used to be in the olden days, say 8, 10, 15 years ago. It used to be about 20% of people were looking to leave California altogether, and the rest were, maybe some were even buying in the same city. I mean, it used to be a fairly common occurrence for me to sell a house in San Jose and then help those same folks buy a house in San Jose. If they were downsizing or upsizing or whatever they were doing, they stayed in the same area. Not so much anymore. Even if someone is just downsizing or upsizing, they're moving way out of the area, or they're even moving out of the state. So, so no problem, Sean. So, I think multifamilies are interesting, and I think multifamilies are the way to go. I'm a huge fan if you're doing the house hacking thing as a first-time buyer. Over the COVID period of time, I helped several folks buy in the Central Valley because there were plenty of opportunities there where almost out of the box those properties would cash flow, meaning you lived in one, you rented the other, and just the rent from the second unit came very, very close to paying at least your mortgage. I think with one of them, she actually got her mortgage covered by that rent from the other side. So all she was paying was property taxes. I think that's a great question, and I don't know. I can't see it wants me to click see more to see the rest of your post. If this is a first time house hack thing for you, or if you're an experienced investor, I don't know. I love multifamilies. And I think it's a great way not only to start, but it's one of those things you start and then you never sell it, right? You continue on with your life and you keep it forever as the first brick in your real estate empire, right? Okay. That is just really a super disappointing mocha. I don't know how many times I can say it. All right. Let's go on to the next one here. Next, we are going to be taking a look at total number of homes sold. Now, remember, this is supposed to be the hot time of the year, right? And we're comparing it to the same time last year. So we're not doing just month to month. And it annoys me when they don't do year over year comparisons, because we want to eliminate seasonal influences, right? Because Christmas time, winter time is very different from June and July. December is very different from January. So talking about some dramatic increase between December and January is goofy because the context isn't there to really make it relevant. But this is just the month of June for 2023 or 2024. So 4% increase in the total number of homes sold. Now, in your head, we've already talked about homes increases to inventory, right? 54% increase in inventory, but only a 4% increase in the total number of homes sold. See, that's a number I like to keep in my head. That clues me in that there may be an interesting shift happening in a marketplace where we're just not seeing the number of homes sold coming anywhere near the new number of homes put on the market, right? So Santa Clara County up 4%, 1,125 sold last year, 1,168 sold this year. In San Jose, that number was up 3%, 561 homes last year, 576 homes this year. Morgan Hill, 45 homes last year, 53 homes this year, for a 18% increase in the total number of homes sold. And here's a weird one. Gilroy, 51 homes sold last year, 33 homes sold this year, for a decrease of 35%. And again, I don't even know how many months it's been that I've been sort of throwing this out there. If Gilroy interests you at all, I think it is quite possibly the best place to get a great deal on a house that is still theoretically within commute distance of San Jose or the heart of Silicon Valley. So feel free to check around. And there's some great areas. If you look at Northwest, right near Christopher High School. Christopher High School is an excellent high school. It's considered the best high school down here in the South Valley. And the homes around there are great. So it's also in higher demand because of those reasons. If you're someone who wants to go a little bit more, what do we call it? Gentleman's estate, I think is what some people call them, like these 5-acre properties that some people put some horses on. Northeast Gilroy has got some beautiful stuff there, but those are areas where you're going to want to spend millions, right? And when you see these places, they're beautiful, so it kind of makes sense. But all right, let's go ahead and move on to the next big number here. I don't think, do I do one for, God, that's been, I don't think I do. Do I do? Yeah, I do months of inventory now on this slide. So this is the total months of inventory. And let's think about what that means for a second. This is a reflection of if we froze the number of homes that sold in the month of June and we froze the total inventory, how long would it take for us to sell everything? And last year it was 1% or 1 month. This year it's 1.5 months for a 50% increase from the same time last year. The lower this number is, the better it is for sellers. The higher the number this is, the better it is for buyers. Nationally, the healthy, balanced market is considered 4.5 months worth of inventory. We haven't been at that number forever. So in San Jose, that is 56% up from last year, 0.9 months last year, 1.4 months this year. Morgan Hill up 33%, 1.2 months last year, 1.6 months this year. Gilroy, 1.5 months last year, up 80% in Gilroy to 2.7 months, which is just wacky. Now, if we also think about inventory numbers, right, when we talked about homes sold a moment ago, in each one of those categories, I like to look at it as, did we sell more homes than we listed or fewer homes than we listed? In other words, did we add to inventory or did we subtract inventory? And so just to sort of cover those numbers real quick, in Santa Clara County overall, we sold 1,168 homes, as we discussed, but we listed 1,598, which means we added 430 homes to the overall inventory in June. Keep in mind, it is not unusual in June to sell more than you list, right? So in other words, that number would be an overall reduction in inventory. The fact that we've added this many in June for the whole county overall, I think indicates a market that's starting to slouch more towards buyers. And this was true in every market. In San Jose, we added 228 homes to the market. In Morgan Hill, we added 25. In Gilroy, we added 43. So just kind of keep that in mind as well in terms of understanding the balance of the market and what might influence your ability to find a home that's right for you, because it's been a long time since we've had inventory at levels that give buyers an awful lot of choice. All right, next, let's go ahead and talk about pending homes. I like to cover pending homes because this is an indicator of future activity. And by that, I mean when a home goes pending, assuming escrow ends up closing, that means that in 30 to 40 days, we're going to see a home sold, right? So, and what does pending mean? It means that someone who wants to buy a home submitted an offer and the seller accepted it. So they started the escrow process, which is, again, a 30 to 40-day process. It gives the buyer an opportunity to do enough research to feel comfortable with the purchase. It lets the lender do an appraisal. It's a time to do inspections, all those kinds of wonderful things, and basically get everything going. So let's take a look at what we saw here, because again, this is another one where keep in mind, the number of homes that went into pending or had accepted offers still does not come anywhere near the increase in inventory that we saw for the county overall, right? We saw 4% in terms of homes sold, an increase from the same time last year. We saw a 16% increase in this number, the pending and contingent, which doesn't come anywhere near padding that number in terms of inventory. So a 16% increase in Santa Clara County. Last year it was 966 homes. This year it is 1,119 homes. San Jose last year was 475 homes that went pending in San Jose. 546 homes went pending in San Jose in June of 2024 for a 15% increase. Morgan Hill saw a 31% increase in the total number of homes that went pending. 39 homes had accepted offers last year in June of 2023, and 51 homes this year had accepted offers in June of 2024. Finally, Gilroy, another stat that is kind of staggering given what the market's doing. And here's another thing. Every once in a while in my podcast, for instance, I will talk about other cities. I'll talk about Las Vegas. I'll talk about Phoenix. I have some canary in the coal mine communities that I think telegraph what we potentially might see down the road. And I think Gilroy is sort of in that category for me. And the fact that we're seeing this happening in Gilroy is something that, again, feeds my staring into the crystal ball mode feeds that idea that we're starting to see a downturn in this market that's going to shift more towards buyers. Again, it's down 20%. It was 45 homes went pending last year, 36 homes went pending this year. And I do a little bit more looking into some of these numbers because I'm sure some of you who understand how stats work realize that the most reliable numbers on here are the county numbers. When you're dealing with handfuls of examples, the one example and it can skew the numbers one way or another. So I like to go look and see if there's any weird outliers in any of these, but these are all super valid numbers for Gilroy that we've been seeing. And I think worth considering as we move forward to try to figure out what we might want to do or not do in the coming months in terms of what the real estate market's seeing. Let's go ahead and jump into the next stat. Another number that I like to look at that most folks don't pay attention to is original list price. Now, why do I look at original list price? Original list price is what the number was the very moment that the seller decided to sell their house. So in other words, the very first asking price for a house that was put into the multiple listing service the day it listed, that's what the original list price is. Now, why do I share that number with you, right? Because this doesn't take into account if the price is increased or decreased. This isn't what that increased or decreased price is. This is a way for us to look inside the minds of sellers because this is expectations, right? Sellers decided, I'm going to put this out there as the price I want to sell my home for, and it tells you confidence levels, right? How confident were the sellers? How much more did they think their home was worth compared to when they bought it or compared to the same time of the year previously? Well, we can see that we've had some moderation in this number because remember, it hasn't been that long since these were double-digit numbers across the board where it was 10% or more, 16%. I think we had one year where I think San Jose had a 22% month once a couple of years ago. Just crazy, right? Well, less than 1% increase in Santa Clara County overall. And remember, largest sample size. So this calibrates us to the most reliable number to guide us. Now, last year it was 1,870,000. This year it's 1,886,000. So just not a dramatic increase. It's also an indicator potentially of where the most activity is happening in terms of price ranges, because as we're going to see here in a minute, sales prices are at a point that they haven't been in a while in Santa Clara County in terms of how high they've gone, but we'll cover that in a second. Next is San Jose, where it's up 2.1%. So sellers overall expected their home to be worth 2.1% more this year in June than they expected it to be in 2023 in June. And that number was 1,411,000 versus 1,441,000 in San Jose. Morgan Hill, the average original list price that sellers were expecting was $1,453,000 in 2023 in June. That went up 10.5% to $1,606,000 in June of 2024. And Gilroy saw a 14.6, almost 15% increase in this expectation number. 1,245,000 last year, 1,426,000 this year. This one is a little artificially skewed because we did see more homes at the higher end in Gilroy. So it obviously, as I said, smaller sample size, single examples can skew it a little bit more. So this did get skewed a little bit more than that because once we can take a look at what the average sales price is, we're going to see that that's really more in line with what expectations are last year. So next, let's take a look at what we're seeing in terms of average sales price. Overall, it was up 7.9% from the same time last year. So expectations not really reaching what the market is delivering, which I think is good. I think it's better for homeowners to underestimate what they can get versus overestimate. But we saw 1,856,000 was the number last year in Santa Clara County, went up 7.9% to $2,002,000 in June of 2024. It's been a while since we've been over $2 million on average sales prices. But we've been there a couple times before in the county overall. And I know we've been there a few times in San Jose, which also saw an increase of 4.4%, 1,490,000 last year in June of 2023, 1,556,000 in June of 2024. So if we take a look at the discrepancy, what's the difference? We can see that for both Santa Clara County and San Jose, sellers got more Their expectations were exceeded by what the market delivered. In the county overall, to the tune of $116,000, and in San Jose to the tune of $115,000, rounding up from $114,952. So in both of those cases, payoffs for sellers, right? Now we get to Morgan Hill. Morgan Hill's number last year was $1,471,000 for the total average sales price in June of 2023, which is up 6.8% this year, $1,572,000 in June of 2024. Now, how does that compare to expectations? Well, it's below expectations to the tune of $34,162. So what sellers were expecting to get in Morgan Hill, what they got was $34,000 below that number. Gilroy. Check out that jump, 12.3% increase from last year, $1,116,000 last year, almost $1,117,000, versus this year's June 2024 number of $1,254,000. But again, they did not meet expectations. Expectations, as we talked about, were $1,426,000 for Gilroy. And what we saw was a loss from expectations, right? $172,275. So despite an increase in the average sales, we saw that expectations were not met by the market in that marketplace. So again, interesting numbers. And across the board, an increase in sales numbers and what the home actually sold for. But again, not huge double-digit increases other than in Gilroy. But interesting to note that this still points to multiple offer scenarios. Now, I've been involved in a couple of sales here in the last few months in these areas, and every one of them was multiple offers. What's interesting is that there were a couple of hiccups. I had one listing that was right after the big increase. It was, when was it? I guess it was April. It was March, April. At the end of March, interest rates took a big jump, literally went from like 6.5 or 6.6 up to 7.3 or 7.4. And that temporarily tweaked buyers' interest in terms of not being willing to take on those interest rates. But as interest rates sort of softened, so it extended the days on market. But what's funny is we normally associate multiple offers with something that happens in the first couple of weeks, right? This was an interesting example of where a market influence tweaked the market for a few weeks. So we ended up adding a week and a half, 2 weeks to the total days on market, but we ended up selling with multiple offers, with 3 offers in our hands, and ended up selling for over asking price. So it's interesting. And if you're paying attention to what's happening in the markets, you can explain it. And at the time, my clients and I understood that's what was affecting us, right? So by having more knowledge, you're able to create more strategies, and that's exactly what we did, and ended up paying off for us in the end. Okay. Next, let's take a look at the percent over or under asking price. And this is looking into the minds of buyers, because this compares what the home was priced at the time it was bought. So in other words, this isn't original list price versus sales price. This is what the listing price was at the time the offer was made. So a buyer saw a home listed for a certain amount of money, and they offered this much above or below that price, right? So, and it's interesting. So we have a 1.6 overall percentage delta between 2023 and 2024 for June in the Santa Clara County. 104.6%, meaning that the average home sold for 4.6% over asking price in June of 2023. In June of 2024, that number went up to 6.2% above, or 106.2 of what the list price was. So still seeing that frenzy, but remember, these homes that sold, where we're getting this data from, those offers were accepted in May, not in June. I'm very interested to see what this looks like for the July numbers for homes that sold. In terms of San Jose, 1.5% increase, 105.2. Last year, 106.7%, so 6.7% over asking, so beat the county overall. Morgan Hill, 102.5 last year, 102.8 this year, so 2.8% over asking price, which fits in exactly with what I've been seeing. That's a 0.3% delta from last year to this year. And then we have 101.7 in Gilroy, down to 101.3, which is a reduction of 0.4%, but still over asking, which implies we're still seeing folks getting offers over asking price, but not to a dramatic degree. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break here for a second. I will be right back, and we will cover, what will we cover? We will cover how many days on market. All right, be right back. Okay, let's jump back in and check out the latest numbers in terms of days on market. And again, we've had this conversation before, but anytime you see the numbers, like as we see in Santa Clara County, San Jose, and Morgan Hill as they are for the month of June in 2024, anytime it's less than 16, 17 days, that's typically an artificial number. You're usually not going to ever see the number any lower than that. And the reason is because in a listing in the MLS or out on Zillow or wherever else, or wherever you can read private notes, which you can't read on Zillow, but where only other realtors can read the private notes of a home, it's going to say, we're not accepting offers until such and such a date. And that's usually 2 weeks out. It allows for the maximum number of people to see the home. It lets some open houses get some traction. So when the market was going nuts, you would have seen homes. If we didn't do that, you would have seen homes selling in 2 or 3 days, right? But this is the smart way to do it, right? This is something I do as well. But it gives you the highest probability of selling with multiple offers when the market's super hot. So what's interesting is we're seeing decreases down from 17 to 16 in Santa Clara County overall. So it's a 6% drop. It's a 1-day drop, but indicating slightly elevated interest in terms of just homes selling faster, right? San Jose was down 6% from the same time last year, from 16 to 15. Morgan Hill was down from 23 days last year to 14 days this year, for a 39% decrease. Interesting, last year is we had a whole lot, in the month of June, we had a whole lot of sell-off of existing inventory. So obviously that reflected higher days on market numbers. And then in Gilroy, we saw a 5% increase. So it went from 22 days to 23 days. So here's the very bizarre thing that we're seeing in Gilroy, where we've got a couple of indicators in terms of original sales price, right? The average sales price is still up from last year, but it is taking homes longer to sell. We're seeing an increase in inventory, but not as dramatic as the other areas. Remember, we had a 54% overall increase in Santa Clara County. The lowest increase was in Gilroy. But then the lowest number of, we had homes sold down 35%. So the numbers in an aggregate reflect to me a hot potential location for you to shop. And we had, I think it was Sean asking about investment properties. If I was looking for multi-unit properties, I would be looking in some parts of Gilroy. I would always have a search running for Morgan Hill and San Jose, just because those are almost always going to work. And here's what's great about multifamilies, and I realize we're jumping around. This is a conversation I should have had when I talked about this first. What I love about investment properties like multifamilies is you in most cases, you are completely pulling emotion out of it. If someone's asking $2 million for a property that will never cash flow at that amount, you just show them numbers and say, listen, I appreciate it, but this property doesn't pencil out at all. And even if you say, well, then if you can't make the mortgage based on what's incoming, then just put down more money. Well, okay, let's pretend you do that. Then you do the math on, well, what's my return on investment? If I do what you're suggesting, what's my return on investment on the money I have into it? Let's pretend I've got $2 million. If after all expensive, I'm only making an amount that indicates I'm making 5% a year on that money, why in the world would I do that? Right? If you've got $2 million and you're happy with a 5% return, stick it into a Wealthfront account that gives you a guaranteed 5% return, right? It doesn't make any sense. For most of my investors, I've got a couple of investors who are willing to do it, go in and start investing for 7. I don't think that makes sense. I think the right number is 10%. And in most cases, I would suggest that you need to consider where your other vehicles of investment are, right? If a index fund for the stock market has been getting 10 or 12%, well, don't you want that or better? And I get that you can also roll appreciation into that. And in my market, appreciation is huge. Remember, we've got some properties that sold just 6 years ago that are now selling for 3 times what folks paid for them. So I get that math is part of that as well. But this is also a investment property. This is a multifamily. So the scenario is more affected by simply what the market's doing with rentals. And that needs to be the primary focus, right? Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to rush towards the shiny thing there. All right. So now we have covered all the stuff where we compare the same time last year to this year. Now, let's see if we can't extract, looking over our shoulder at previous months, and look for trends and see what was the trend then versus what we're seeing now. And so here we are, we're looking at total number of active listings, and we see we haven't hit the peak. The peak was June of 2022, June, July of 2022. Can anyone else think what was going on in that time frame? That's when interest rates had gone up, right? So the interest rates had just started to go up in March. They hadn't quite hit their peak. We were still a few months away from the absolute peak. But that was kind of what was going on. Interest rates were just absolutely insane in terms of just being more scary, right? We had jumped from being at 3% to being at 4, then 5, then 5 and something, and then 6. So we had a huge inventory June and July of 2022. We have now hit, if we look at then June of 2023, look at how flat that is. Inventory was absolutely down. So as we compare ourselves to last year, the same time last year, let's keep in mind how bizarrely down some of these numbers were last year. But what was the trend? So the trend was rapid increase into June in 2022, where we kind of almost hit a peak, and then it went up a little bit more for July. What are we seeing now? We saw a drop from May to June. That does not happen. The inventory drop doesn't tend to happen between May and June, but we'll see what happens in July. But we would normally expect to see a increase from June to July. So let's see if that actually happens. But this is kind of interesting that we've started to see this downward trend after June or on June, between May and June. Just kind of weird. I'm not used to seeing that. Next, let's take a look at total number of new listings. Huge drop from last month. In May, we peaked and we saw a huge drop into June. Last year, we saw a big drop between May and June, not as dramatic as the drop we're seeing here. And then in terms of 2022, again, we saw a drop. So very typically normal, I guess, is what we can say, where a drop between May and June is not an unusual thing. It's the dominant occurrence. But then if we look at what happens after June, if we see that in July, it also continued to go down in 2023. We saw that in July of 2022, it stayed about flat and then dropped. But normally what we see as we hit June, there may be some weird blips up or down as we see in past years. But normally once we get past June and July, that's when we start to see things going down in general in terms of new listings. it's the season is wrapping up, and normally we see this crashing out in December of that year. So we usually start a trend where we start heading into a decline that hits its bottom in December of that year. If we take a look at the total number of homes sold, we can see that between May and June, we've had a pretty decent dip. What's interesting is in May, June of 2023, we didn't get a dip. We saw it just very much on par. It was very flat. And then in May, June of 2022, we did see a dramatic drop in the total number of homes sold. But again, that was expected for that year, given some of the funky stuff we were seeing relating to interest rates on mortgages. Next, pending homes. We can see a dramatic drop in pending homes that really sort of mimics the total number of homes sold. We had a similar decrease between June and July of 2023, and then in June of July of 2022, again, another drop. So what we might expect is that this number continues to drop. If we look at what led up to June, really big drop in 2022, and another really big drop in 2023. So this is what we find is June is sort of a stopping point as the number declines. And starts its inevitable drop that usually bottoms out in December as well. Next, let's talk about average price versus average list price versus sales price. It's always interesting when these numbers diverge. We can see that they were very close together in June of 2023 with a drop in average sales price the following month that kind of then increased and stayed flat as we headed into September, and then started a drop in December of 2023. If we look at where we are right now between May and June, we can see that the average list price is down and the average sales price is also down, but a less dramatic trend of dropping in terms of the sales price. If we want to see what's going to happen with sales price in July, if we look at this chart and we see the consistency of the last 2 years, we can see that normally sales prices drop the following month. So keep that in mind. Sales prices were already decent this month or for the month of June. But remember, between expectations and reality, both Morgan Hill and Gilroy fell short by a pretty good chunk of change. With these other influences we're seeing in terms of inventory and homes listed, I can't help think that might push this market down a little bit more, which would see us noting a decline in the total number of homes selling for over asking price. But we'll see how that plans out. I'm not willing to commit to that prediction, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw it. Next, Santa Clara County, percent of asking price. Let's take a look and see what the trends were. The trend now is down. We saw our peak in April, and we're at 106.2 now. We're at 109 in April. Just crazy, right? If we look at last year, if we see June of 20, it was right around 104.8, 104.9 in June of last year, which was relatively flat. But take a look at the months leading up to June last year. June was kind of where the peak was. We got an earlier peak this year, which is interesting, but we should expect this to do nothing but decrease from here if we just read our last data. And if we look at last year, again, June of 2022, the peak again was in March, April. And this is a trend we see from time to time where earlier and earlier in the year, the buyers come out to buy stuff. But we can see that it decreased quite a bit between June and July of 2022. So not going to surprise me at all if that's what we see. In fact, if I was a betting man, I wouldn't maybe drop $1,000 on it, but I wouldn't mind putting a 20 on betting that this number is going to go down next month. Days on market. We can see it went up a little bit from last month. Not a dramatic increase, but if we see what led us from May to June last year, it was a decrease. We did see an increase from May to June of 2022, but again, the reason why I brought up interest rates affecting things in April, May is I I think that's what's affecting things here. I think that dramatic change of interest rates in 2022 is what prematurely pushed up days on market in that year. So it was a much more of a dramatic increase. What happens after? Typically, normally days on market goes up from here. We can see that in 2022 and in 2023. Wouldn't surprise me if we see that again. And particularly since we've seen a much more dramatic change. You can see that the increase in 2023 from June to July was far more mild than between May and June of this year. But we can see that it went up this year and down last year and up the year before that. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot, but I would guess that days on market's going to go up overall. All right. Now let's go ahead and take a look at properties that have had a price reduction. And this is just the percentage. And last month in Santa Clara County, we had 21% of the homes on the market that sold had a price reduction. Same number this year, or this month. So not a change. Real estate very, very flat, but it's a 48% change over the same time last year. So more homes are seeing reduced price this year than the same time last year. In San Jose, last month it was 19%. This month it's 23%. So more homes are having to reduce their price for a year-over-year change of 90%. So we had almost no homes with price increases in June of 2023, but it's up 90%. Now, what's interesting is when we blend this number with what we were seeing in percent of asking price, remember, that's based on what the price was at the time. So any price reductions were rolled into that. So it might be an interesting exercise to mathematically figure out how many of those homes where we're seeing this over asking price offer were actually listed at a much higher price previously, because these numbers indicate that this is a decent percentage of the overall number of properties on the market and would actually affect that. Morgan Hill, 21% last month, 25% this month, so an increase in the number of homes that had to have their price reduced. That's a 16% increase overall from the same time last year. And then Gilroy, 28% last month, 28% this month. And consistently, Gilroy has been pretty high on this one in terms of communities that have regularly seen price reductions. That's a 67% overall increase from the same time last year. So blending that in with expectations, the fact that these numbers are still so high continues to indicate to me that we're facing some challenges, and we all know that it's a micro market, right? San Jose, quoting San Jose numbers is almost insane, right? Because there are so many different submarkets within San Jose. My address when I was a kid was officially San Jose, but I lived in way west San Jose, Saratoga, Sunnyvale, and Prospect, so practically Cupertino. I went to Limbrook High School. And that market, super different from East San Jose. So, and every market in between. There are markets in San Jose that I've shown recently where you literally cross a street and homes with the same square footage basically go from being $850,000 to $1.4 million, right? These could be homes that were built within a decade of each other, but because there's a prestige associated with certain areas, because this neighborhood has palm trees lining the streets, whatever it is, the desirability just goes crazy, right? So submarkets are a huge thing in San Jose. Now, if anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to ping them. We're going to go ahead and just sort of run through some of the news items that I've got saved off here. And we'll start off with, maybe I'll just do my usual horrible self-promotion thing to start. Let's see. I want to give folks an idea of my stuff. So this is my website. This is soldbyrobert.com. And again, as I mentioned, you can find the podcast right here. You can go to the podcast webpage. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible. Google Podcasts, I think, actually is dead now, so I should probably get rid of that. Radio Public, TuneIn, Podbean, Stitcher, and then just a straight RSS feed if that's the way you roll. But that's not what I wanted to draw your attention to. What I wanted to show you was this, which is a great place to get a instant free market analysis. Now, for those of you who've been following me for a while or past clients, you know that every year between right around November, December, I evaluate the tools that I provide to my potential clients to figure out what ones are best. And I found HomeBot, I think 2 years ago now, and they are by far the best. And I don't say that as the best, meaning it gets me the most people who will come and talk to me. I mean, in terms of tools to have in your tool belt to help you understanding and commanding your home's value, this is a great tool. Is it going to give you what everybody gives you, which is basically a algorithmically generated estimate of the value of your home? Yes. Is it going to be more accurate than others? In most cases, yes. When I compare this to like Redfin or Zillow or Yahoo or wherever else I'm looking at, or Realtor.com, I find that this number tends to be closer to the accurate number that I come up with when I do a market analysis for a property. But that's not it. If you never want to sell your home, if you never want to see my face, all you want to do is have really good data on what the value of your home is and what you can do with that value, this is an amazing tool for you. So it does the home value estimator, right? But it also lets you evaluate your home equity. It looks you look at home purchase options, refinance options, and it's going to tell you in red, see, it does it right here. Would you save money or lose money if you refinanced? Bam. There it is. It tells you right there. Don't do it. It's not going to make sense for you to refinance right now. If it looks green and it looks like a good option for you, there's a link directly to a local lender who can help you explore your options. You get your mortgage summary, which gives you great tools to figure out where you are with your mortgage, and also to figure out what would be the effect of you increasing your mortgage payment. Things like if you want to sell, what are the signals that indicate you should sell or not sell? You might have up to X amount of purchasing power for a new home. You could use about $144K of equity to feel more ready for a storm, so it helps you plan for any problems that might come around. Net worth, you can take a look at it and figure out what makes sense. You can figure out the calculation for this and tweak it to make more sense for you. And it also gives you what if scenarios. What if I wanted to rent it? What if I want to do a monthly rental? What if I wanted to do nightly rentals? So maybe an Airbnb kind of thing. So all of these tools are part of this thing. And it's simply the best tool I've ever seen. And it's the first time in a long time where a tool that I started using has lasted more than 2 years. So let me just say that's the way to go. And more power to you. If you never call me, never talk to me, I think the worst case scenario is you will get onto my mailing list where you will get not only this mailed to you monthly, but you'll also, I think, get stuck on my newsletter list. But that never happens more than once a month, so it's not something I'm going to pester you with. So just thought I'd throw that out there. And then, of course, I've also got an online searching tool that you can start with right here and start looking for your next home. So that is it for that. I just wanted to throw that out there, just so you know where the tool is. Now, let's go ahead and run through some of these headlines. These are the 10 America's best states for buying and selling a home in 2024 with a big caveat on number one. This one kind of just came by my flow, and initially I just ignored it. But what was interesting to me is there's 2 states here that border California. So, and they're states that folks have frankly mentioned to me that they want to go to. Now, Tennessee is a big one that a lot of folks have mentioned to me that they're considering moving to. That's a little too far east for me. But first, there's Nevada at number 6 on this list. Housing market historically volatile. I'm keeping a close eye on the real estate market in areas that interest me in Nevada. It is definitely leaning more into being buyer friendly, so it's something you might want to check out. You potentially the sales price, median sales price, absolutely, that is a correct number. But if you are someone who is going to look for properties that are not your typical suburban house, you're going to look for something that's got that crazy view of the mountains or just scenic or whatever. You're not going to pay as much as you'd pay here in California for that, but it's going to be almost double that in terms of some of the things I've looked at. Next was Arizona, which is number 3 on this list. I'm actually going to be doing a road trip the first week of August, where I will be going through Arizona and checking out some communities that I think are interesting. With high housing affordability, it really depends on what you want. I'm more of a northern Arizona guy in terms of interest. I've helped plenty of folks sell their homes here in California and move to Phoenix. I've been to Phoenix a bunch of times. Phoenix isn't really, it's a big, giant city, so you're going to totally get that urban, city feel from there. And it's not even just Phoenix, right? The greater Phoenix area is multiple cities that all blend into one. It's a lot like Los Angeles, right? Where there's Los Angeles and there's all the bordering cities that sort of make this giant footprint of a city. But I thought it'd be interesting to mention those two as having made this list as two of the 10 best places that are border options. If you're someone who wants to stay close enough to California for whatever reason, or you don't want to move that far, these are great options for you. So I thought I'd point those out. Next, a slew of new rental laws is determining who landlords can rent to. We've seen, as Californians, we know this has been a reality for a very long time in terms of the state or the county wanting to tell us how we should be allowed to rent our private property. I'm a little offended by that. I am very much a private property rights person. Let me get another swig here of the coffee. So I'm annoyed by this. I'm more of a market guy. When you let the market just sort of do its thing, things tend to work out. I'm much more of a let the government get out of the way kind of a guy on these things. Because all of these things that limit what you're allowed to do with your private property, and at some point you have to ask yourself, how is it my property when I can't do what I want to do with it? I mean, at what point do I no longer own it? At what point is it really just the government that owns it and I'm renting it from them? So what's interesting is some of the headlines. I'm just going to hit the headlines here because all of these are annoying. Refuse to rent or evict based on criminal activity. And there are, I believe in Oakland, it's actually against the law for you to do a background check on a potential tenant. And that is ridiculous. I mean, I know people who do background checks on someone they're about to start dating, which is, kind of creepy in some ways. But the idea that you would let someone into your private property that you have not vetted in whatever way you feel is important really annoys me. The law was enacted to varying degrees by different municipalities and drew on strong support from the police, prosecutors, and politicians to help keep neighborhoods safe, especially in areas with drug and gang-related problems. However, an LA Times investigation discovered that minorities were disproportionately affected and prevented from attaining housing after their sentence had been served, preventing them from finding accommodation. So the problem to solve there is not make people rent to people who have committed a crime. It is address the underlying issues that in these minority communities indicate that they are represented more in those crimes, in the commission of those crimes. All of these commissions of these crimes were life choices made by those people that are going to have consequences, and renters or landlords who aren't going to rent to them is going to be part of that problem. I don't know. That's just kind of the way it falls out for me. Limits on the amount a tenant must pay up front. See, now this should be negotiated between the tenant and the landlord. If you're coming in with giant dogs, or if you're coming in with a criminal history, if you're coming in with higher risk factors for you as a tenant, the landlord should be allowed to ask for more. I think any rational person who does a walkthrough on a property. So here's an example. I've helped an awful lot of people buy an awful lot of properties over the last 35 years. And a good percentage of those folks have been investor people or folks who lived in the house for 10 years and then decided to rent it and move on to a bigger house. I have had a couple of those folks who did not take my advice and did not do background checks on people. And in one case, had a situation like this where not only was this person a felon, a former, out of prison, they paid their debt, but had a criminal record, got out. And you also have to understand what they're asking you to do, right? If you understand the recidivism rate among offenders, you realize that you have a much higher probability of then being forced to rent to someone who will then engage in illegal activity. And that's not heartless or that's just understanding the stats. In any event, this person, and I believe it was in Gilroy, southeastern Gilroy somewhere. Not only was this person selling drugs, but they turned the top floor of the house into a grow house, and the home got raided. And the person stopped paying rent. So once you do a walkthrough of a house that's been one of those kinds of houses, not only are you out whatever rent that person didn't pay, and you're out because you couldn't evict them, because this person tried to evict them for months. They had photos that they gave to the cops indicating illegal activity was going on, and nothing happened for months and months and months. Once they got inside, that house was trashed. It was almost to the point, the kitchen was so damaged, if I recall correctly, they had to actually redo the entire kitchen. Carpeting torn up, holes in the walls, doors torn off their hinges, and it was just disgusting. The smell in there was horrible. So the idea that the burden of those costs is being transferred to landlords, what are you going to do as a person who wants to be a landlord? Now, I recently sold my rental properties. I had a vacation rental property in Hawaii that I sold because of this kind of thing. The intrusive nature of what the state of Hawaii and the county of Oahu thought they should be allowed to do in terms of defining what you can and can't do with your private property made it untenable. And here's what's really sad. So I'm a guy who's been doing this for a while, so I understand how this stuff can potentially work. I know people who owned in the same building where I owned, where that was their retirement. Not that they were going to live there in their retirement, but the income from the short-term rentals of that property was their retirement income. They had bought and lived there for 10, 15, 20 years, then moved away and were going to make that their income. And now they are hosed. And it's not because of a natural market thing that happened. It was because of what the state and county did to them. And it just annoys the heck out of me. Bad credit is not a reason to deny an application. Absolutely bad credit should be a reason to deny an application. If someone proves historically they don't pay their rent, why in the world would I rent to them? California Bill SB 267 prohibits landlords and property managers from using a person's credit history as part of the application process if they have a government rental subsidy such as Section 8 without offering the applicant the option to provide alternative evidence of a verifiable legal means to pay their portion of the rent. And Section 8 is another example of programs that have failed and still get perpetuated. Under California law, landlords cannot refuse to rent to a tenant if they have a Section 8 voucher. They cannot post no Section 8 or no vouchers on their rental advertisements or ask to see your Section 8 eligibility before renting. Now, in a lot of areas, this doesn't matter simply because the rents that are being asked for in a lot of places Section 8 won't cover it. But anyway, and then landlords must have a good cause for not renewing a tenant's lease. So once you sign a lease with a tenant, it is binding beyond its term. Now, that sounds unconstitutional to me. If I sign an agreement with you that says we have an agreement for 6 months or 1 year or whatever it is, that this is what will happen, and then at the end of that 1 year, I say, okay, our agreement is over. I would like to move back into my house, or I'd like to use it for something else, or I want to completely remodel it. This is putting limitations on that. It's ridiculous. And a lot of the reasons that you'll hear rapid increases in rents at the end of the coronavirus protection saw homelessness soar 12% by the end of 2023. About 653,000 people were in homeless. The number is however, what's interesting is the places that have been most intrusive into property ownership are the places where you see the worst examples of homelessness. If these states, and this is obviously just my personal opinion, so don't hate me. If these areas that have the worst examples of these problems, but are also places with the highest level of interference with property rights and landlords and whether homes can or can't be built, if they stepped back from all that stuff, if they just went back to what the rules were in 2000, this would self-correct very, very quickly. Because the things that were going on in 2000, the amount of extra burden that was placed on home builders, for instance, dramatically increased between 2000 and 2007. And of course, none of those burdens got removed with the downturn in 2007 because it was the state money grabbing for a bigger piece of the pie. And of course, they're not going to give up a piece of the pie. They're going to keep that going, right? But in any event, in my mind, the solution here is less of this. Less interference from the government, less interference from local folks in terms of telling you what you can and can't do with your property that you own and pay taxes on. But I'll tell you what, other things that should go along with this, if there is any suffering experienced on the part of the landlord as a result of this, in other words, you forced me to rent to a felon who's now committing crimes in my property. And of course, there are some areas where if the police find out that crimes are happening on your property and you're the landlord, even though the law now makes it almost impossible for you to get rid of them, the cops try to seize your property because you're not dealing with the problem. But if any of these things happen, you shouldn't have to pay property taxes. If because of rules put out by the government prevent you from being able to take income from the property because no one's paying rent and everyone's doing damage to your property, then you shouldn't have to pay property taxes. It should be that simple. And let's see how long these laws last. If suddenly you don't have to pay property taxes, let's see how long these laws last. They would disappear overnight. So anyway, next, Biden rent increase limit. This is ridiculous. These kinds of restrictions should never even be talked about at the federal level. So I don't even know where to go with that one. June 2024 rental report. Median asking rents continue to fall. I think this is super interesting. This is the percent, the median rent year over year change. It's down, what is it? Almost 1%, 0.6. And then, of course, rents overall, this is what the median rent has gone up, but overall trending down. Let's see. This one, all units saw waning rent declines. National rents overall, 1,743, a studio 1,463, one bed 1,618, two bed 1,939. And I can obviously here in my local area, these numbers are way off. If you've got a 2-bedroom place you're renting, you're probably renting it for $3,500, $3,000. It's not cheap. We could take a look on Zillow and just see what's happening. Interesting to note, as I mentioned, my oldest son is going to be going to law school. And he starts in the first, I guess it's August 18th or 17th is when school starts there at the University of Houston. And he managed to find himself a 1-bedroom apartment where he's spending either $990 or $1,010 a month. So he's doing all right. It's in a demilitarized zone. If what I'm seeing in terms of crime rates in those areas is any indicator, but at least it's a fenced community with secure parking. So anyway. Let's see. Houston isn't on this list. Table 2 top markets experiencing the fastest rent growth. Now, this is why I tend to read these markets because it's always cool to see what areas are growing, and particularly if I see anything in California. And this time around, we do see the Sacramento, Roseville, Folsom area being up. Now, I used to live up in Auburn, which is just north of Roseville, but that's an interesting number to see. With a 35.8% increase between June of 2019 and June of 2024. So that's a pretty dramatic increase. And interesting that's in the top 10. That's good for that one. What else have we got? Mortgage rates fall to 6.77. You know what? Let's do a quick check of what I usually do this before the show, but let's see here. Let's get a real world right now example. And let's not do Morgan Hill and San Jose numbers always come out the same, but since there's so many more people in San Jose, let's just do the San Jose thing. And we all saw that the average sales price in San Jose was 1.5. So let's make this 1.5 million. All right, 1.5 million, 20% down. The lowest monthly payment, $7,883 a month, but it's 6.875. Now, check this out. So that's at 20% down. If we go to 25, you get more options, right? But with some higher interest. Go up to, and remember, this is assuming excellent credit. If we go up to 30%, we can see that things change a little bit. I mean, look at that. We were at 7,300 and something or whatever it was before. Now we're down to 6.375, 0 fees, and 6,551. So super interesting. And this is something I've been doing on a fairly regular basis just to see where the line is. There used to be no line at 25%. 20 and 25% used to be identical in terms of what loan products were available for you, but I'm finding far more interesting options available when you're willing to put 30% down. But at 30% down, at the average price in San Jose, that's 450 grand, right? So a huge barrier to entry in terms of what you might be able to do in San Jose. But that's what we're seeing in real numbers. These, you could click on these and get more information on these loans and see where they might go for you. Let's see. We already talked about interest rates, weekly housing trends. Where's the big ones? Here we go. Median listing price, flat, according to the national numbers. Of course, what we saw was that the average list price was up 0.9%, so a little bit more than flat. New listings were up 8.8%, up 37% in the county for us. Total number of active listings up 35.8%, up 54% in Santa Clara County. And homes overall across the country are selling 5 days slower. We are seeing them selling faster, right? We saw it go down by usually a day in each case. In Morgan Hill, it was down by 9 days, and in Gilroy, it was up by a day. So these are the national trends. Finally, oops, what the heck? All right, California home sales down 3% year over year in June. Fourth look at local housing markets in June. California doesn't report monthly inventories, but they do report the year over year change. So that's an interesting note for California overall. And obviously, in terms of total number of homes sold, we're up 4%, not down 3%. So we definitely local in our markets. We buck the trend. Now, if anyone's got any more questions, feel free to pop them into the chat now. We had a couple of people post some stuff, responded to Sean asking about multifamilies. And if there's anything else, I'm happy to chat about it. We're past 11. I do have some stuff going on today, and I hope you guys are. Some of it's going to be fun. I'm going to be spending a little bit of the late afternoon, kind of right around sunset, doing a little motorcycle ride here in the local area, maybe up to near the Mount Madonna area. So maybe I'll see you guys up there if you're looking to enjoy yourselves. And then earlier in the day, we're going to be looking at a couple of houses. So it'll be out there actively checking to see how the market is doing and what we're doing in terms of what new homes have come on the market. I usually will spend a little time with brand new listings on a Saturday afternoon. So. All right, folks, again, if you'd like to get in contact with me, feel free to reach out at soldbyrobert.com. I'm happy to help you reach your real estate goals, whatever those might be. www.soldbyrobert.com. And I look forward to seeing you guys next month. I hope you enjoy the rest of your coffee. And make sure to keep an eye out for my podcast that's going to be coming out